Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Wine. It's a very interesting thing, isn't it? Often it is used for certain purposes of calming down. However, at times it has been known to do the exact opposite. Journey with me to see tales in which it has done the exact opposite, as well as tales of madness in general. I welcome you to the nights of Poe. Our first story begins with just that. Madness, wine induced. Perhaps the oldest, most dangerous of human desires. That for revenge. This is the Cask of Amontillado. The 1,000 injuries of Fortunato I have borne as best I could, but when he ventured upon insult, I vowed revenge. You, who so well know the nature of my soul, will not suppose, however, that I gave utterance to a threat. At length, I would be avenged. This was a point definitively settled. But the very definitiveness with which it was resolved precluded the idea of risk. must not only punish, but punish with impunity. A wrong is unredressed when retribution overtakes its redresser. It is equally unredressed when the avenger fails to make himself felt as such to him who has done the wrong. It must be understood that neither by word nor deed have I given Fortunato cause to doubt my goodwill. I continued, as was my wont, to smile in his face, and he did not perceive that my smile now was at the thought of his immolation. He had a weak point, this Fortunato. Although in other regards he was a man to be respected and even feared, he prided himself on his connoisseurship of wine. Few Italians have the true virtuoso spirit. For the most part, their enthusiasm is adopted to suit the time and opportunity, to practice imposture upon the British and Australian millionaires. In painting and gemmary, Fortunato, like his countrymen, was a quack. But in the matter of old wines, he was sincere. In this respect, I did not differ from him materially. He was skilled in Italian. I was skilled in Italian vintages myself, and bought largely whenever I could. It was about dusk one evening during the supreme madness of the carnival season that I encountered my friend. He accosted me with such excessive warmth, for he had been drinking much. The man wore Macbre. He had on a tight-fitting party striped dress. His head was surmounted by the conical cap and bells. I was so pleased to see him that I thought I should never have done wringing his hand. I said to him, "My dear Fortunato, you are luckily met. How remarkably well you are looking today. But I have a pipe of what passes for Amontillado, and I have my doubts." "How?" said he. "Amontillado? A pipe? Impossible! In the middle of this carnival!" "I have my doubts," I replied, "and it was silly enough to pay the full Amontillado price without consulting you in the matter. You were not to be found. I was fearful of losing luck." "Amontillado! I have my doubts. Amontillado! I must satisfy them. Amontillado! As you are engaged, I am on my way to Lucchese. If anyone has a critical turn, it is he. He will tell me Lucchese cannot tell Amontillado from sherry. And yet some fools will have it that his taste is a match for your own. Come, let us go." "Whither?" "To your vault." "My friend, no, I will not impose upon you. I perceive that you have an engagement. Lucchese, I have no engagement. Come." "My friend, no, it is not the engagement, but the severe cold with which I perceive you are infected. The vaults are insufferably damp. They are encrusted with nice. Let us go, nevertheless. Cold is merely nothing. Amontillado, you should have been imposed upon. And as for Lucchese, you cannot distinguish sherry from Amontillado." Thus speaking, Fortunato possessed himself of my arm. Putting on a mask of black silk, and drawing a roquelaire closely about my person, I suffered him to hurry me to my palazzo. There were no attendants at home. They had absconded to make merry and honor the tide. I had told him that I should not return until the morning, and had given them explicit orders not to stir from the house. These orders were sufficient, I well knew, to ensure their immediate disappearance, one and all, as sure as my back was turned. I took from their sconces 2 flambeaux, and giving one Fortunato, bowed him through several suites of rooms to the archway that led into the vaults. I passed down a long and winding staircase, requesting him to be cautious as he followed. We came at length to the foot of the descent, and stood together on the damp ground of the catacombs, Montresors. The gait of my friend was unsteady, and the bells upon his cap jingled as he strode. "Pipe," said he. "It is further on," I said. "But observe the white webwork which gleams from these cavern walls." He turned toward me, looked into my eyes with 2 fluid orbs that distilled the rheum of intoxication. "Neither?" he asked at length. "Neither," I replied. "How long have you had that cough?" My poor friend found it impossible to reply for many minutes. "It is nothing," he said at last. "Come," I said with decision, "we will go back. Your health is precious. You are rich, respected, admired, beloved. You are happy, as I once was. You are a man to be missed. For me it is no matter. We will go back. You will be ill, and I cannot be responsible. Besides, there is Lucchese." "Enough," he said. "The cough is a mere nothing. It will not kill me. I shall not die of a cough." "True." "True," I replied, "and indeed I had no intention of alarming you unnecessarily. But you should use all proper caution. A draught of this Midnght will defend us from the damps." Here I knocked off the neck of a bottle which I drew from a long row of its fellows that lay upon the mould. "Drink," I said, presenting him the wine. He raised it to his lips with a leer. He paused and then nodded to me familiarly. All his bells jingled. "I drink," he said, "to the buried that repose around us, and I to your long life." He took my arm again. We proceeded. "These vaults," he said, "are extensive." "The Montresors," I replied, "were a great and numerous family." "I forget your arms. A human foot door, and few azure. The foot crushes a serpent rampant, which fangs are embedded in the heel. And the mother, Nemo me impune la siguiente." "Good," he said. Before I venture any further, I would like to translate that. It translates to approximately in English from Latin, "No deed against me shall go unpunished." However, notice that in that coat of arms, both are dying. The wine sparkled in his eyes and his bells jingled. My own fancy grew warm with the adult. We passed through the walls of piled bones with casks and puncheons intermingling into the inmost recesses of the catacombs. I paused again, and this time made bold to seize Fortunato by an arm above the elbow. "The nitre," I said. "See, it increases. It hangs like moss upon the vaults, where below the river's bed drops of moisture trickle along the bones. Come, we will get you back ere it is too late. Your cough, it is nothing," he said. "But let us go on. First, let us drop this water." I broke and reached for a flagon of the Grave. He emptied it with a breath. His eyes flashed with a fierce light. He laughed and threw the bottle upward with a gesticulation I did not understand. I looked at him in surprise. He repeated the movement, a grotesque one. "You do not comprehend?" he said. "Not I," I replied. "Then you are not the Brotherhood!" "How?" "You are not of the Masons." Yes, I said. "You? Impossible! A Mason?" "A Mason," I replied. "A sign," he said. "It is this," I answered, producing a trowel from beneath the folds of my robe. You jest!" he exclaimed, recoiling a few paces. "But let us proceed to the Amontillado." "Be it so," I said, replacing the tool beneath my cloak and again offering him my arm. He leaned upon it heavily. We continued our route in search of the Amontillado. We passed through a range of low arches, descended, passed on, and descending again, arrived in a deep crypt in which the foulness of the air caused our flame ball rather to glow than flame. The most remote end of the crypt there appeared another, less spacious. Its walls had been lined with human remains, piled to the vault overhead, in the fashion of the great catacombs of Paris. 3 sides of this interior crypt were still ornamented in this manner. On the 4th, the bones had been thrown down and lay promiscuously upon the earth, forming at one point a mound of some size. Within the wall, thus exposed by the displacing of bones, I perceived a still interior recess, in depth about 4 feet, in width 3, in height 6 or 7. It seemed to have been constructed from no especial use within itself, but formed merely the interval between the 2 colossal supports of the room of the catacombs. It was backed by one of the circumscribing walls of solid granite. It was in vain that Fortunato, uplifting his dull torch, endeavored to pry into the depth of the recess. Its determination in the feeble light did not enable us to see. "Proceed," I said. "Herein is the Amontillado. As for Lucchese, he is an ignoramus," interrupted my friend, as he stepped unsteadily forward, while I followed immediately at his heels. In an instant, he had reached the extremity of the niche, and finding his progress arrested by the rock, stood stupidly bewildered. A A moment more and I had fettered him to the granite. In its surface were two iron staples, distant from each other about 2 feet horizontally. From one of these depended a short chain, and the other a padlock. Throwing the links around his waist, it was but the work of a few seconds to secure it. He was too much astounded to resist. Withdrawing the key, I slipped back to my recess. Pass your hand, I said, over the wall. You cannot help feeling the night. Indeed, it is very damp. Once more, let me implore you to return. Well, then I positively must leave you. But I must first render you all little attentions in my power. Immortal! Ejaculated my friend, not yet recovered from his astonishment. True, I replied. The Amontillado. As I said these words, I busied myself along the pile of bones which before I had spoken. Throwing them aside, I uncovered a quantity of building stone mortar. With these materials and with the aid of my trowel, I began vigorously to wall up the entrance of the niche. I had scarcely laid the first tier of the masonry when I discovered the intoxication of Fortunato had in a great measure worn off. The earliest indication I had of this was a low, moaning cry from the depth of the recess. It was not a cry of a drunken man. Then there was a long and obstinate silence. I laid the second tier, and the third, and the fourth, and I heard the furious vibrations of the chain. The noise lasted for several minutes, during which, that I might hearken to it with some satisfaction, I ceased my labors and sat down upon the bones. When at last the clinking subsided, I resumed the trowel and finished without interruption the fifth, the sixth, the seventh tier. The wall was now nearly upon level with my breast. I paused again, and holding up the flame ball over the mason work, it threw a few feeble rays upon the figure within. A succession of loud and shrill screams bursting suddenly from the throat of the chained form seemed to thrust me violently back. For a brief moment I hesitated. I trembled. Unsheathing my rapier, I began to grope about with the excess, but the thought of an instant assured me. I placed my hand upon the sound fabric of the catacombs and felt satisfied. I reapproached the wall. I replied to the yells of him who clamored. I re-echoed. I aided. I surpassed them in volume and strength. I did this, and the clamoring grew still. It was now midnight. My task was drawn to a close. I completed the 8th, the 9th, the 10th tier. I had finished a portion of the last and the 11th. There remained but a single stone to be fitted and plastered in. I struggled with its weight. I placed it partially in its destined position. But now there came out of the niche A low laugh that erected the hairs upon my head. It was succeeded by a sad voice, which I had difficulty in recognizing as that of the noble Fortunato. A very good joke indeed. An excellent jest. You don't have any rich lad about the palazzo. Number one. The Amontillado, I said. Yes, the Amontillado. Isn't that getting late? They have to wait for us. Palazzo. The lady Fortunato. The rest has become. Yes, I said. Let us be gone. For the love of God, Montresor! Yes, I said. For the love of God. But to these words, I hearkened in vain for a reply. I grew impatient. I called aloud, Fortunato! No answer. I called again, Fortunato! No answer still. I thrust a torch through the remaining aperture and let it fall within. It came forth in return only a jingling of bells. My heart grew sick. On account of the dampness in the catacombs, I hastened to make an end of my labor. I forced the last stone into its position. I plastered it up. Against the new masonry, I re-erected the old rampart of gods. For the half century, no mortal has disturbed them. In pace, requiescat. As I had said, it can lead to madness. Terrible shames at knots. This next tale is a different kind of madness. And it isn't so much madness of lunacy as it is mad as in rage. The story is called Hop Frog. I never knew anyone so keenly alive to a joke as the king was. He seemed to live only for joking. To tell a good story of the joke kind, and to tell it well, was the surest road to his favor. Thus it happened that his 7 ministers were all noted for their accomplishments as jokers. They all took after the king, too, being large, corpulent, oily men, as well as inimitable jokers. Whether people grow fat by joking, whether there is something in fat self which predisposes joke, I have never quite been able to determine. But certain it is, the vain joker is a rara avis in Perilous. About the refinements, or as he called them, the ghosts of wit, the king troubled himself very little. He had an especial admiration for the breadth of the jest, and he would often put up with length for the sake of it. Over necessities wearied him. He would have preferred Albertus Gargantua to the Zandig of Voltaire, and upon the whole practical jokes suited his taste far better than verbal ones. The date of my narrative, professing jesters had not altogether gone out of fashion at court. Several of the great continental powers still retained their fools, who wore motley with caps and bells, and they were expected to be always be ready with sharp witticism at a moment's notice in consideration of the crumbs that fell from the royal table. Our king, as a matter of course, retained his fool. The fact is, he required something in the way of folly, if only to counterbalance the heavy wisdom of the 7 wise men who were his ministers, not to mention himself. His fool, or professional jester, was not only a fool, however. His value was trebled in the eyes of the king by the fact of his being also a dwarf and a cripple. Dwarves were as common at court in those days as fools, and many monarchs would have found it difficult to get through their days. Days are rather longer at court than elsewhere, without both a jester to laugh with and a dwarf to laugh at. But, as I have already observed, your jesters in 99 cases out of 100 are fat, round, and unwieldy. So it was no small source of self-gratulation with our king that in Hop Frog, this was the fool's name, he possessed a triplicate treasure in one person. I believe the name Hop Frog was not given to the dwarf by his sponsors of baptism, but was conferred upon him by the general consent of the 7 ministers on account of his inability to walk as other men do. In fact, Hop Frog could only get along by a sort of interjectorial gait, something between a leap and a wriggle, A movement that afforded illimitable amusement, of course consolation to the king, for, notwithstanding the protuberance of his stomach and the constitutional swelling of the head, the king by his whole court was accounted a capital figure. But although Hop Frog, through the distortion of his legs, could move only with great pain and difficulty along a road or floor, prodigious muscular power which nature seemed to have bestowed upon his arms by way of compensation for deficiency in the lower limbs, enabled him to perform many feats of wonderful dexterity. Where trees or ropes were in question, anything else. In such exercises, he certainly much more resembled a squirrel or a small monkey than a frog. I'm not able to say with precision from what country Hop Frog originally came. It was some barbarous region, however, that no person ever heard of. A vast distance from the court of the king. Hop Frog and a young girl very little less dwarfish than himself, although of exquisite proportions and a marvelous dancer, been forcibly carried off from their respective homes in adjoining provinces and sent as prisoners to the king, one of the ever-victorious generals. Under these circumstances, it is not to be wondered at all that a close intimacy arose between the two little captives. Indeed, they soon became sworn friends. Hop Frog, who, although he made a great deal of sport, was by no means popular, and it had not in his power to render Trippetta many services, but she, on account of her grace and exquisite beauty, although a dwarf, was universally admired and petted. So she possessed much influence and never failed to use it whenever she could for the benefit of Hop Frog. On some grand state occasion, I forget what, the king determined to have a masquerade, and whenever a masquerade or anything of that kind occurred at our court, the towns of both Hop Frog and Trippetta were sure to be called into play. Hop Frog, in especial, was so inventive in the way of getting up pageants, suggesting novel characters, and arranging costumes for mass balls. Nothing be done, it seems, without his assistance. The night appointed for the fete had arrived. A gorgeous hall had been fitted up under Trippetta's eye with every kind of device which could possibly give eclat to a masquerade. The whole court was in a fever of expectation. As for costumes and characters, it might well be supposed that everybody had come to a decision on such points. Many made up their minds as to what roles they should assume a week or even a month in advance. And in fact, there was not a particle of indecision anywhere, except in the case of the king and his son ministers. Why they hesitated, I could never tell, unless they did it by way of joke. More probably, they found it difficult, on account of being so fast, to make up their minds. At all events, time flew. As a last resort, they sent for Trippetta and Hop Frog. When the two little friends obeyed the summons of the king, they found him sitting at his wine with the 7 members of his cabinet council, but the monarch appeared to be in very ill humor. He knew that Hop Frog was not fond of wine, for it excited the poor cripple almost to madness, and madness is no comfortable feeling. But the king loved his practical jokes and took pleasure in forcing Hop Frog to drink and, as the king called it, to be merry. "Come here, Hop Frog," said he, as gesturing his friend into the room. "Swallow this bumper to the health of your absent friends." Here Hop Frog sighed. "And then let us have the benefits of your invention. We want characters. Characters, man! Something novel! Out of the way! We are wearied with this everlasting sameness. Come, drink! The wine will brighten your wits." Hop Frog endeavored, as usual, to get up and just reply to these advances of the king, but the effort was far too much. It happened to be the poor dwarf's birthday, with a command to drink to his absent friends forced tears to his eyes. Many large, bitter drops fell into the goblet as he took it humbly from the hand of the tyrant. Roared the latter as the dwarf reluctantly drained the beaker. "See what a good glass of wine can do. Why, your eyes are shining already!" Poor fellow. His eyes gleamed rather than shone, for the effect of the wine on his excitable brain was not more painful than was not more powerful than instantaneous. He placed the goblet nervously on the table and looked round upon a company with a half-insane stare. They all seemed highly amused at the success of the king's joke. "And now to business," said the Prime Minister, a very fat man. "Yes, come, Hop Frog, lend us your assistance. Characters, my fine fellow. We're needing characters. All of us." And just as seriously it was meant for a joke, his laugh was chorused by the seven. Hop Frog also laughed, although feebly and somewhat vacantly. "Come, come," said the king impatiently. "Have you nothing to suggest?" "I am endeavoring to think of something novel," replied the dwarf abstractedly, for he was quite bewildered by the wine. "Endeavoring!" cried the tyrant fiercely. "What do you mean by that?" "I perceive you are sulky and want more wine. Here, drink this!" And he poured out another gobletful and offered it to the cripple, who merely gazed at it, gasping for breath. "Drink, I say!" shouted the monster, "or by the fiends!" The dwarf hesitated, turning purple with rage. The courtier smirked. Geppetto, pale as a corpse, advanced to the monarch's seat, and, falling on her knees before him, implored him to spare her friend. The tyrant regarded her, and for some moments, evident wonder at her audacity. He seemed quite at a loss what to do or say. Most cunningly to express his indignation. At last, without uttering a syllable, he pushed her violently from him and threw the contents of the brimming goblet in her face. The poor girl got up as best she could, not even daring to sigh, resumed her position at the foot of the table. There was a dead silence for about half a minute, during which the falling of a leaf or a feather might have been heard. It was interrupted by a low but harsh and protracted grating sound, which seemed to come at once from every corner of the room. What? What? What are you making that noise for? Demanded the king, turning furiously to the dwarf. The latter seemed to have recovered in great measure from his intoxication, and looking fixedly but quietly into the tyrant's face, merely ejaculated, "I? How could it have been me?" The sound appeared to have come from without, observed one of the courtiers. "I fancy it was the parrot at the window, wetting his bill upon his cage wires." "True," replied the monarch, as if it much relieved the suggestion. "But on the honor of a knight, I could have sworn it was the gritting of this vagabond's teeth." Hereupon the dwarf laughed. The king was too confirmed a joker to object to anyone's laughing, and displayed a set of large, powerful, and very repulsive teeth. Moreover, he avowed his perfect willingness to swallow as much wine as desired. The monarch was pacified, and having drained another bumper with no perceptible ill effect, Hopfrog entered at once, and with spirit, into plans for the masquerade. "I cannot tell you what the association of idea," observed he very tranquilly, as if he'd never tasted wine in his life. "But just after your Majesty had struck the girl and thrown wine on her face, just after your Majesty had done this, while the parrot was making that odd noise outside the window, it came into my mind a capital diversion. One of my home country frolics, often enacted among us at our masquerades, but here will be new altogether. Unfortunately, however, it requires the company of 8 persons, and here we are!" cried the king, laughing as a cute discovery of the coincidence. "8 to a fraction. I and my 7 ministers. Come, what is the diversion?" "We call it," replied the cripple, "the 8 chained orangutans. It is really an excellent sport, well enacted." "We will enact it," remarked the king, drawing himself up, lowering his eyelids. "The beauty of the game," continued Hopfrog, "lies in the fright it occasions among the women." "Capital!" roared in chorus the monarch and his ministry. "I will equip you as orangutans," proceeded the dwarf. "Leave all that to me. The resemblance will be so striking that the company of masqueraders will take you as real beasts. And of course, They'll be as much terrified as astonished. "Oh, this is exquisite!" exclaimed the king. "Hop Frog, I will make a man of you." The chains are for the purpose of increasing the confusion by their jangling. You were supposed to have escaped en masse from your keepers. Your Majesty cannot conceive the effect produced at a masquerade by having 8 chained orangutans, imagined to be real ones by most of the company, and rushing in with savage cries among the crowd of delicately and gorgeously habited men and women. The contrast is inimitable. "It must be," said the king, and the council rose hurriedly as it was growing late to put into execution the scheme followed. His mode of equipping the party as orangutans was very simple but very effective for his purposes. The animals in question had, at the epoch of my story, very rarely been seen in any part of the civilized world, and as the imitations made by the dwarf were sufficiently beast-like and more than sufficiently hideous, the truthfulness of nature was thus thought to be secure. The king and his minister were first enacted in tight-fitting stockinette shirts and drawers. They were then saturated with tar. At this stage of the process, some of the party suggested feathers. The suggestion was at once overruled by the dwarf, who soon convinced the 8 by ocular demonstration that the hair of such a brute as a orangutan was much more effectively represented by flax. A thick coating of the latter was accordingly plastered upon the coating of tar. A long chain was now procured. First it was passed round the waist of the king and tied, then about another of the party and also tied, and then about all successively in the same manner. When this chain arrangement was complete, the parties stood as far apart from each other as possible, formed in a circle. To make all things appear natural, our frog passed the residue from the chain in 2 diameters at right angles across the circle, after the fashion adopted at the present day by those who capture chimpanzees or large apes in Borneo. The grand saloon in which the masquerade was to take place was a circular room, very lofty, receiving the light of the sun only through a single window atop. At night, the season for which the apartment was especially designed, it was illuminated principally by a large chandelier depending by a chain from the center of the skylight, and lowered or elevated by means of counterbalance as usual, but in order not to look unsightly, this later passed outside the cupola over the roof. The arrangements of the room had been left to Tripet's superintendence, but in some particulars it seemed she had been guided by the calmer judgment of friend the dwarf. At his suggestion, it was that on this occasion the chandelier was removed. Its waxen droopings, which in warm weather was quite impossible to prevent, would have been seriously detrimental to the rich dresses of the guests, who, on account of the crowded state of the saloon, could not all be expected to keep out from its center. That is to say, from under the chandelier. Additional sconces were set in the various parts of the hall out of the way, and a flambeau, emitting sweet odor, was placed in the right hand of each of the carriages that stood along the wall, some 50 or 60 altogether. The 8 orangutans, taking Hot Frog's advice, waited patiently until midnight, and the room was thoroughly filled with masqueraders before making their appearance. No sooner the clock ceased striking, however, than they rushed in, or rather rolled in, altogether, for the impediments of their chains caused most of the party to fall, and all to stumble as they entered. The excitement among the masqueraders was prodigious, and filled the hearts of the king with glee. As had been anticipated, there were not a few of the guests who supposed the fierce-looking creatures to be beasts of some kind in reality, if not precisely orangutans. Many of the women swooned with affright, and had the king not taken the precaution to exclude all weapons from the saloon, his party might have been expiated for their frolic, their blood. As it was, a general rush was made for the doors, but the king had ordered them to be locked immediately upon his entrance, and at the door's suggestion, keys had been deposited in. When the tumult was at its height, each masquerader attended only to his own safety, for in fact there was much real danger from the pressure of the excited crowd. The chain by which the chandelier ordinarily hung, and which had been drawn up on its removal, might have been seen very gradually to descend, till its hook's extremity came within 3 feet of the floor. Soon after this, the king and his 7 friends, having reeled about in the hall in all directions, found themselves at length in its center, and, of course, immediate contact with the chain. While they were thus situated, the dwarf were noiselessly at their heels, inciting them to keep up the commotion, took hold of their own chain, the intersection of the 2 portions which crossed the circle diametrically at right angles. Here, with the rapidity of thought, he inserted the hook from which the chandelier had been wont to depend, and in an instant, as some unseen agency, the chandelier chain was drawn up so far upward as to take the hook out of reach, and, as an inevitable consequence, to drag the orangutans together in close connection, face to face. The masqueraders, by this time, had recovered in some measure from their alarm, and, beginning to regard the whole matter as a well-contrived pleasantry, set up a loud shout of laughter at the predicament of the apes. "Leave them to me!" now screamed Hot Frog, his shrill voice making itself easily heard through all of the din. "Leave them to me! I fancy I know them. If I could only get a good look at them, I could soon tell you who they are." Here, scrambling over the heads of the crowd, he managed to get to the wall, then, seizing a flambeau from one of the carriage sides, and now, with the whole assembly, apes included, convulsed with laughter, the jester suddenly uttered a shrill whistle, and the chain flew violently up about 30 feet, dragging with it the dismayed and struggling orangutans, and leaving them suspended in midair between the skylight and floor. Hot Frog, clinging to his chain as it rose, still maintained his relative position in respect to the 8 maskers, and still, as if nothing were the matter, continued to thrust his torch down toward them, as if though discovering who they were. And so thoroughly astonished his own company at this ascent that a dead silence of about a moment's duration ensued. It was broken by just such a low, harsh, grating sound as had before attracted the attention of the king and his counselors. The former threw the wine in the face of Tripetta. But on the present occasion, there could be no question as to whence the sound issued. It came from the fang-like teeth of the dwarf, who ground them and asked them. As it foamed at the mouth. And glared with an expression of maniacal rage at the upturned countenances of the king and his 7 companions. Aha! Said at length the infuriated jester. I begin to see who these people are now. Here, pretending to scrutinize the king more closely, he held the flambeau to the flaxen cloak which enveloped him, which instantly burst into a sheet of vivid flame. In less than half a minute, the whole 8 orangutans were blazing fiercely amid the shrieks of the multitude who gazed at them from below, horror-stricken and without the power to render them the slightest assistance. At length the flames, suddenly increasing in violence, forced the jester to climb higher up the chain, to be out of reach, and as he made his movement, the crowd again sank, for a brief instant, into silence. The dwarf seized his opportunity and once more spoke. I now see distinctly, he said, what manner of people these maskers are. They are a great king and his 7 privy councillors. A king who does not scruple to strike a defenseless girl. His 7 councillors who bet him in the outrage. As for myself, I am simply humble. Jester, and this is my last jest. Owing to the high combustibility of both the flax and the tar to which it adhered, the dwarf had scarcely made an end to his brief speech before the book of evidence was complete. The 8 corpses swung in their chains, a fated, blackened, hideous, and indistinguishable mass. The crippled horders tugged at them, clambered leisurely to the ceiling, and disappeared through the skylight. It is supposed that Trippetta, stationed on the roof of the saloon, and the accomplice of her friend, has fiery revenge, and that together they effected their escape to their own country, for neither was seen again. Madness comes in many forms, as does the desire for vengeance. And often in Poe's tales, it will be a lurid thing like that. I've saved my personal favorite of Poe's short stories. The one I feel is the most lurid and unnerving of the last. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you the Telltale Heart. True! Nervous. Very, very dreadfully nervous. I had been and am. But why will you say that I am mad? Disease had sharpened my senses. Not destroyed. Not dulled them. Above all, the sense of hearing was acute. I heard all things in the heaven and in the earth. I heard many things in hell. How of them? Am I mad? Hearken and observe how healthily, how calmly I can tell you the whole story. It is impossible to say that the first idea entered my brain, but once conceived, it haunted me day and night. Object, there was none. Passion, there was none. I loved the old man. He had never wronged me. He had never given me insult. For his gold I had no desire. I think it was his eye. Yes, it was. And it was his eyes resembled that of a vulture. The pale blue eye with a film over it. Whenever it fell upon me, my blood ran cold. And so by degrees, very gradually, I made up my mind to take the life of the old man, and thus rid myself of the eye forever. Now this is the point. You fancy me mad. Madmen know nothing. But you should have seen me. You should have seen how wisely I proceeded. With what caution. With what foresight. With what dissimulation I went to work. I was never kinder to the old man than during the week before I killed him. And every night about midnight I turned the latch to his door and opened it. gently. And then, when I had made an opening sufficient for my head, put in darker, all closed, so that no light shine out. And then I thrust in my head. Oh, you would have laughed to see how cunningly I thrusted it. I moved it slowly, very, very slowly, so that I would not disturb your man's sleep. It took me an hour to place my whole head to the opening so far as I could see. So many pipes better. What a madman who been so wise as this. And then, when my hair was round the room, I undid the lantern cautiously. Oh, so cautiously. Cautiously. The hinges creaked, and I did it just so much. A single thin ray of light fell upon every dry. And I did this for 7 long nights. Every night just at midnight. But I found I always closed. And so it was impossible to do the work. For it was not the old man next me, but his evil eye. And every morning, when the day broke, I went boldly into the chamber and spoke courageously to him, calling him by name in a hearty tone, inquiring how he had passed the night. So you see, he would have been a very profound old man indeed, to suspect every night just a talk. I looked in on him while he slept. Upon the 8th night, I was more than usually cautious in opening the door. A watch in its hand was quickly into the light. Ever before I felt the extent of my own powers. Samson, I could scarcely contain my feelings of triumph. To think that there I was, opening the door, little by little. He did not even treat my subdued. I fairly cycled at the idea. Perhaps he heard me, for he moved to the bed suddenly as he started. Now you might think that I drew back, but no. His room was black as pitch, with thick darkness, for the shutters closed for fear of robbers. And so I looked. He could not see through the door. I can push it on still. I had my head hidden and was about to open the lantern when my thumb slipped on the tin fastener. The old man sprang up with it. Who's there? I kept quite still and said nothing, For a whole hour, I did not move a muscle. And in the meantime, I did not take it out loud. He was still sitting up in bed asleep, just as I have done, night after night, darkly to death watches me. Presently, I heard a slight groan, and I knew it was a groan of mortal terror. It was not a groan of pain or grief. Oh no, it was a low, stifled sound that rises in my soul when overcharged below. I knew the sound well. Many a night, just at midnight, when all the world slept, it is welled up from my own bosom, deepening with its dreadful echo the terrors that distracted me. I say I knew it well. I knew what the old man felt, and pitied him, although I took heavy heart. And I knew the ache had been lying awake ever since the first slight noise. But he turned the bed. His fears had been ever since. He had been trying to find skin causes, but he could not. He had been saying to himself, "There's nothing in it to me. The wind, his own mouse crawls to the floor. Or is merely a cricket which made a single chirp." Yes, he has been trying to comfort himself with all these suppositions, but he had found all in vain. All in vain, because death, and approaching him, had stopped with his black shadow before him, and enveloped the victim. And now, he was in mournful influence, unperceived, shadowed the constant fear, although he neither saw nor heard, to feel the presence of my head within the room. When I had waited a long time, very patiently, without hearing my turn, I resolved to open the door. Oh, very cross in the ledge. So I opened it. You cannot imagine how stealthy, until similar to the rain, like a thread of a spider, shot out from the crevice. The vulture eye. It was open. Wide open. I grew furious as I gazed upon it. I saw it with perfect distinctness. All that dull world, with the hideous veil over it to shield the pain out of my bones. I could not see anything else of the old man's face or person, but I directed the rays with my instinct precisely on the damn spot. And now, have I not told you what you mistake for madness is but overcurious on senses? Now, I say, there came to my ears a low, dull, quick sound, such as a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. I knew that sound too. It was the beating of the old man's heart. It increased my fury. Beating the drum stimulates the soldier into courage. But even yet, I refrained and kept still. I scarcely breathed. I held the lantern motionless. I tried how steadily I could maintain. Meanwhile, the hellish tattoo of the heart increased. It grew quicker and quicker and louder and louder every instant. The old man's terror must have been extreme. It grew louder, I say, louder every moment. Do you mark me well? I have told you that I'm nervous. So I am. And now, the dead hour of the night, amid the dreadful silence of that old house, so strange a noise, this excited me with uncontrollable terror. Yet for some minutes, my friend stood still, but the beating grew louder, louder. I thought the heart was burst, and now a new anxiety seized me. The sound will be heard by a neighbor. The old man's hour had come. With a loud yell, I threw open the lantern and leapt into the room. He shrieked once only. In an instant, I dragged him to the floor and pulled every bed over her. I then smiled wearily to find the deed so far done. But for many minutes, the heart beat on the muffled sound. This, however, did not vex me. It would not be heard through the wall. The painting ceased. The old man was dead. They removed the bed and examined the corpse. Yes, it was stone, dead. I placed my hand upon the heart and held there many minutes. There was no pulsation. He was still dead. His eye was shut. If you still think me mad, you will think so no longer when I describe the wise precautions I took for the concealment of the body. The night waned, and I worked hastily, but in silence. First of all, I dismembered the corpse. I cut off the head, the arms, and the legs. And then I took up the 3 planks from the flooring, the chamber, deposited it all between the scaffoldings. I then placed the board so kindly, that no human eye, not even his, could have detected anything wrong. There was nothing to wash out, no stain of any kind, no blood spot whatsoever. I've been too wary for that. A tub caught all. When I made an end to these labors, it was 4 o'clock, still dark as midnight, and the bell sounded the hour. I came a knocking at the street door. I went down to open it. The light on. What had I now to fear? There entered 3 men who introduced themselves. Perfect suavity as officers of the police. A shriek had been heard by a neighbor during the night. Suspicion of foul play had been aroused. Information had been around. The obliged police office and then the officers had been deputed to search the premises. I smiled. For what? What I do? I bade the gentleman broken. The shriek I said was my own victory. The old man I mentioned was absent in the country. I took my visitors all over the house. I bade them search. Search well. I led them at length to his chamber. I showed his trousers, secure, undisturbed. In the enthusiasm of my conference, I brought chairs with me and desired them here to rest from their fatigues. I myself, in wild dust, my perfect trial, placed my own seat upon the very spot beneath which reposed the corpse of the victim. The officers were satisfied. My manner had convinced them. I was singular at ease. They sat. I answered cheerfully. They chatted familiar things. But ere long, I felt myself getting pale. They wished me gone. My head ached. I fancied a ringing in my ears. Still they sat and chatted. The room became more distinct. It continued to become more distinct. I talked more freely to get rid of the feeling. But continued and gained definitiveness until, at length, I felt the noise was not within my ears. No doubt I now grew very pale, but I talked more fluently and with a heightened voice. Yet the sound increased, and what could I do? It was a low, dull, quick sound, much as sand, much such a sound as a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. I gasped for breath, and the officers heard it not. I talked more quickly, more vehemently, but the noise steadily increased. I rose about and argued about trifles in a high key and with violent gesticulations, but the noise steadily increased. Why would they not be gone? I paced the floor to and fro with heavy strides, as if excited to fury by the observation of the men. But the noise steadily increased. Oh God! What could I do? I foamed. I raved. I swore. I swung the chair upon which I had been sitting and grated it upon the floors, but the noise arose over all and continually increased. It grew louder. Louder! Louder! And still the man chatted pleasantly and smiled. Was it possible to hear that? Almighty God! No! No! They heard
They suspected. They knew. They were making mockery of my horror. This, I thought. And this, I think. But anything was better than this agony. And anything was more tolerable than this derision. I could bear those epic critical spirals no longer. I felt I must scream or die. And now, again. Hark! Louder! Louder! Vids! I shrieked. Dissemble no more! I admit deceit! Tear off the